This is our boiler room stroke storage area where we keep the coats and the shoes. And for the last couple of years we've been using this freestanding coat stand which came from a previous property. It's been okay, but it's now getting a little bit overloaded with the amount of coats we have to hang on it. And because it's freestanding, it's well away from the wall, which means it's coming out into the room and really sort of getting in the way. So today's little project to ease us nicely into 2024 is to make a wall-mounted coat rack. And I'm thinking out of oak to match my doors and the other bits and pieces in the house. So I can get all of this against the wall, get this out of the way, get it all nice and tidy, and keep the boss happy. Every time I'm anywhere near a hardwood offcut shop, I take the opportunity to pick up a piece or two. So I have a number of pieces of oak and maple sitting around with nothing to do. So this is a good opportunity to put one to good use, together with some coat hangers that I picked up at a local DIY store. So one of the problems I've had with just buying one of these rather than making it is that every shop I've gone into has had a coat rail that's only about 400 or 500 millimeters long. And I want something nice and long to get all the coats in my family up and out the way, which means that if I bought one, I'd have to buy two, and it all looks a bit naff and it's all a bit MDF as well. So I'm thinking a nice piece of oak that I got from an offcut shop that says £11 that I bought a few months ago, and using some very straightforward silvery coloured wicks hat and coat hooks. I can just screw these on, I can decide the gaps between them. Not quite sure how many I'm going to need. And as usual, it's not quite as simple as it looks. Firstly, the oak board I want looking nice, and I want it looking like a rectangle, and at the moment it's not a rectangle. One end is 145, the other end is 137, so it's not quite rectangular, so I'm going to have to trim that up to start with. Secondly, I want a nice bevel all around the outside and it to be finished nice. Even if you can't really see it through the coats, I still want it to be looking and matching with the rest of the house. And thirdly, I really want an invisible fixing onto the wall, and I was thinking originally about putting a fixing behind one of these, so I could fix it to the wall, then screw this on, and then you'd never see the fixing. But having looked at them, they're so small, there's such little room, I don't think I can do that. So I'm going to have to find another way, probably using plugs, to fix this to the wall without seeing any of the fixings. Although you probably won't be able to see any of the fixings because it's going to be full of coats anyway. So that's really for my satisfaction rather than anyone else's. Anyway, first thing we need to do is to make this into a rectangle. I use my homemade jig that has a nice straight edge on one side to clamp my oak piece to run it parallel to the fence. If you don't use a jig like this on a board with two wavering edges, the chances are as you push the board through the blade and along the fence, you'll get a cut that's not straight and you'll end up going round in circles. With one edge now straight, I can spin the piece around 180 degrees and use that edge along the fence to cut the opposite edge nice and parallel. On the miter saw, I trimmed both ends square, and I've ended up with the longest rectangular piece possible out of what I've started with, which is around 135 millimeters wide by 1100 long. On the front face, I want some sort of detail on the edge, so I set up my tabletop router and fence to cut a 45-degree bevel all around the perimeter. I cut this in 2 passes, raising the cutter in between, just to help out the router with this hard oak. And after a few minutes it's done and I can get everything sanded. So I think it's about time to have a bit of a members only section just while I'm hand sanding this. It's okay, I must admit, these sanders are really good and I should have bought one years ago. Trend gave this to me a couple of years ago and I should have bought one years before that. So these are really good, but there's nothing like sort of hand sanding. I don't want to roll over all these corners and edges, but I don't want them really sharp. So for something like this, it's like there's hardly any grit on there at all. It's a really good way of just finishing it and then just feeling what it's like. So these anything sort of mechanical is good, but it's nice to finish off and actually feel what the things looks like and feels like. And you might have noticed, I don't know if you can see it on camera here. Here, hang on a second. You might have noticed I've just got a bit of an injury. I just end up head-butting a bit of wood while I was changing over my extractor. That teaches me to only have one extractor in the workshop. Ow. Ow! Well, today is not going so well. So yeah, just a small project today. As I said before, especially in the first half of this year, I'm going to intermix the longer projects with the smaller ones. So I've actually got, well, I've got 3 things going on at the moment, but this is, in theory, hopefully, if it works, a 1-day video where I can do everything in a day. So I have to do some of these shorter ones to give me time to do some of the longer ones. And some of the longer ones are a little bit more tricky. Anyway, I'm rambling on. Let's, the thing I'm a little bit worried about this is I'm now going to be drilling some holes to fix it to the wall and then drill in some plugs to fill those holes so I've got an invisible fix in. The drill bits and the plugs that I bought hopefully are sharp enough. The actual bits are sharp enough that I don't get a ragged edge. So I think with some offcuts of oak, I'm going to try that sort of behind the scenes before I touch my nice board here. The other thing that I won't be mentioning on camera is I've got a bit of a split in this board, but it's so minor and so small that I don't think it's going to propagate and go anywhere. And it's only a coat stand anyway, so I would fill that with sort of glue if I could, but it's such a slight thing. I don't think I can even get any glue in there, so it's going to have to stay where it is. Maybe that's why this offcut was pretty cheap. So that is nice and smooth and probably ready for a bit of finish. Now I mentioned a little bit earlier about invisible fixings, and for that I'm going to be cutting some plugs to hide the screws that are going to screw this to the wall. And for that I'm going to use a plug cutter, and if you haven't seen plug cutters, they look like this. I've got two different types here. I think this is a tapered one. I never get on very well with these ones. I much prefer the straight ones, and what you do is you drill these into a piece of wood of the same type as the wood that you're going to be trying to hide this fix in, and it produces a plug. Now that plug you then can use to hide the top of a screw if you match it with the right size bit. Now this plug is a little bit big for this bit, but I can just smooth it down a little bit, just sand it down, gives a nice tight fit. So essentially you drill a hole, you put the fixing in, and then this plug will get glued and pushed in there, and then I'll just cut it off flush and sand it, and in theory you won't see that at all. Now the only thing that might scupper my plans a little bit is whatever finish I'm going to be putting on this, and I think I'm going to go for boiled linseed oil. It may well soak in a little bit around the top, and the end grain may soak in a little bit more linseed oil, so it might just sort of highlight it a bit. But anyway, at least it's not a screw into the wall. So let me show you how to use one of these. These plug cutters, in my experience, can be a little bit awkward to use, and although I've used them with a standard cordless drill in the past, I think it's better to use them on a pillar or bench drill and not to push the drill too much, especially on hardwoods like oak, or else everything starts smoking and burning. I only need 4 plugs, but I'm cutting 6 just in case, as they're so quick to cut. Where I'm mounting this coat stand, I have 2 electrical sockets that I'm mounting it in between, and the wires are going up vertically to the first floor, so I really need to make sure that I miss these. So before I drill anything, I work out where my fixing holes need to be. I've decided to finish this oak with linseed oil, and before I drill any holes in the face. I like the natural look of linseed oil on oak, and it's really easy to apply, and the smell reminds me of summer days working on my cricket bat, if anyone remembers doing old-fashioned things like that. The first and last hanger I position around 2 inches from each edge, and then space the other 5 equally, which end up around about 150mm or 6 inches apart from each other. To make sure they're all positioned the same distance from the top and bottom edge, I make a small spacer that I use to set the bottom of each hook so they're all regular and in a nice straight line. I then counterbore 4 fixing holes that are going to take my fixings and the plugs just above 4 of the hooks, that hopefully will help hide them from view. Sometimes it's really difficult holding something like this against the wall and marking 4 drilling positions with the spirit level in place while holding it and making sure it doesn't move around. So this time I only mark 1 fixing point at the end of the board. With that in place and supported, then it's really easy to re-level the piece, hold it in place and mark the others without anything moving. With it nice and secure against the wall, the plugs can now get glued and tapped in, making sure the grain on them is lining up with the grain on the board. I leave these in for a bit to get some strength before trimming them, which also gives me a chance to go back into the workshop and sharpen my chisel before I attempt it. finished the plugs with a bit of linseed oil, which I'll need to do again at some point, as the board has already had 2 coats, so the plug at the moment is a touch lighter in colour. Once all the plugs are in and I've given them a little bit of linseed oil, then all I need to do is put on the coat hooks and the job is done. That isn't going anywhere. And I must say it's really nice taking the coats off the freestanding coat stand and putting them against the wall on my new hanger. It really gets everything out the way. And now I can get rid of this. And that looks a lot neater now it's all against the wall, and it's actually given us a lot more space because I'm actually standing where the old coat stand used to be, so it took up quite a bit of room. So I know someone who's going to be very happy about that. Height wise, I positioned it just for my wife. She found the other one a lot higher, and that's one of the great things about DIY. You can do it to suit yourself. You don't have to take anyone else's view on anything. And I love the idea that I've now got an 1100 long oak coat and hat stand. It's not something you can buy in the shops, so that matches the doors and everything else in the house really nicely. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Remember, 2024 is the year to get out and do some DIY, and I hope to help you along the way. I will see you next time.